in the topic, but I'm pleased to introduce Cassie Skaggs, who works for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, my former employer. She's the newest refuge manager at our own local Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge. She also manages the Kankakee National Wildlife Refuge, and I think she came to us from Crab Orchard, is that right? Further downstate in Illinois. But she's going to talk to us about Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge, an urban model for the National Wildlife Refuge system.
Thanks, Jeff. Hello, so my name is Cassie Skaggs, as Jeff mentioned. I'm pretty new here, so this next slide is something I typically don't put in a presentation to a crowd like this, but I know some of you have worked together for decades, and I'm the new kid in the sandbox, so to speak. So just a little bit of background about myself. And I do want to phrase this as I do work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and that picture of me as a child was probably 30 years ago, not kosher now, I would say. But my love for wildlife really started young. This is one of the first pictures I can find of me enjoying wildlife. I started, just pursuing every opportunity I had. I went to the University of Georgia where I studied gopher frogs. I'm originally from Southwest Georgia, if you could tell. And after I graduated, I started bouncing around, doing biotech work, worked for the Georgia legislature for a brief period of time as a committee aide for the Senate Natural Resources Committee. And, spent time in the Everglades doing water quality stuff, riding in helicopters, driving airboats. This was me in high school, volunteering at a zoo where I got to hold alligators and, talk to people about screech owls with a live animal. So that was a lot of fun. I learned quickly if I wanted to get in permanent somewhere, I needed to go to grad school. So I went to Louisiana State University down in Baton Rouge, studying waterfowl and looking at the effects of oil and gas development on their nesting success in the Bakken Formation of North Dakota. Spent time, that picture up in the far corner there is piping plover chicks. So I got to, monitor them, catch them, band them. So a lot of fun. And now I am a refuge manager. So I like to start with this slide because, a lot of refuges, I don't think they start typically how Hackmatack started. And I want to just pay some respect to those people that set that stage, which were the friends of Hackmatack. And I see some of them here today, and you heard from Cindy Skertrude, who's also a part of the Friends of Hackmatack. And they really laid the groundwork here. They were able to connect a lot of pieces of why refuge would be needed in this area and why folks supported it. And it kind of came to fruition. And that quote down there, I think, is probably going to be in every presentation I ever give. Nothing happens unless first a dream. It's something the Friends of Hackmatack often say if you've seen some of their presentations. And it's really true here as well. So for those that might not be as familiar with Hackmatack, because like I said, I don't know most of you, some of you I do know, I wanted to kind of give that background. So this is some mapping done by the McHenry County Conservation District, and it's showing the oak resources of McHenry County. So you can see this is what it would have been around 1837, and if you can't quite read all this fine print, focus in on those green areas, and you can see over time those just start to disappear. This is 50% loss by 1872, 1939 over 80% loss, and then by 2012 only 12% of the original oak remaining. So this kind of starts to set that stage of why, just development starts to happen. People make a living, you got a farm to eat, you do these kinds of things, and sometimes that starts to shrink some of these resources. Then we started to see some endangered and threatened species in Illinois. You see kind of those hot spots in the northeast there. And then you see down here in southeast Wisconsin, which is kind of where we are today. You can start to see some of those things start to decline as well. So how the Fish and Wildlife Service got involved. Okay, this seems like a great area to start to conserve some of this habitat. There's not much of it left, and we know a lot of these benefits. So here are some of our land protection strategies. Protect areas of high grassland, oak savanna, wetlands, federally listed species. As you can imagine, as that kind of habitat starts to decline, the species that depend on it also start to decline. So protecting, linking these corridors, riparian corridors, recreational trails, restorable wetlands, and of course this is willing landowners. You know, I think sometimes you think about all this land development and that kind of stuff, or even farmland. Farmers are some of the hardest working folks I know. You know, they care about that resource, they care about wildlife, that's just how they make their living. But sometimes we can find a way to all work together to have those resources still in the landscape too. So what ended up happening is the Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge was established in 2012 by that great team of folks really working and talking to people, giving a presentation to many folks like yourself. I think 10 years ago, Ed Collins came and gave a talk about Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge and how it came to be, or what the plan was. And about 10 years ago now, that actually happened. So here's kind of that boundary map, and this is really different than a lot of other refuges. So you see, some folks call it like a donut hole there, and that's because there's a town there, right? You're not gonna put a refuge right in the middle of a subdivision necessarily. And there's farms and those kinds of things, important aspects of this community. But we could also do that core corridor concept where we're linking already large pieces of conservation land with other pieces and create that consistent habitat. So the brown pieces are kind of these larger contiguous land masses, where those lighter brown are conservation corridors where it might not all be contiguous, but it's enough for wildlife and other species to move in this donut shape, if you will. So this is the refuge footprint. And when maps like this come up, I think sometimes people get nervous, and I'm learning who all of you are too. So I don't know what all of your backgrounds are. However, you know, folks think, oh, they're gonna acquire all this land. Willing landowners, this does not mean that every square inch of this is gonna become refuge. You know, some of it may be staying in private land ownership, and folks work with those private landowners to do a conservation project where they can even still farm, or we could figure out a way to, you know, maybe protect those wetlands on their property, things like that. I just want to put that out there because I do know folks get nervous sometimes when they see maps like that. With that being said, it's pretty miraculous the number of folks that kind of came together to make this happen. So I kind of pull these land protection calls together now, and I've led two to give you how, you know, an idea of how fresh I am to this area. But all of these folks kind of came together to kind of lend resources to make this dream happen. Now there's over 40 people that sit in on these calls. And I just want to kind of, you know, give thanks to all these folks. It's why I have a job now here. So to kind of go over the goals of Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge: protect enhanced habitats for grassland-dependent migratory birds, protection of wetlands and grasslands. And then here are our big 6 priority uses that are pretty common across all national wildlife refuges: hunting, fishing, wildlife observation, photography, environmental education, and interpretation. And then a third goal here is to promote science, education, and research to encourage the responsible stewardship of our natural resources. And that's, as I mentioned, Ed Collins, who gave a talk on Hackmatack about 10 years ago. That's him planting a tree right there. So now kind of to the meat of the talk, and kind of how does this connect to the Urban Wildlife Conservation Program. So I don't know how many of you are really familiar with the National Wildlife Refuge System. We just celebrated 115 years as of March 14th, so just a couple of days ago. The refuge system was initially established in 1903 with Pelican Island, trying to protect some of those wading birds that their populations were declining really, really rapidly for the plume trade. I think at that point in time, a pound of plume feathers for fancy lady hats and things like that was worth about a pound of gold. So as you can imagine, market hunters going and just trying to get as many of these as they can. And so that started the refuge system. And as over time, continue to protect these threatened and endangered species. I think a lot of people associate Fish and Wildlife Service with threatened and endangered species. And refuges started popping up all over. However, we've begun to learn over time, folks don't really know what a refuge is. They may lump it in with a bunch of other conservation agencies. So this is kind of where that idea of the urban wildlife conservation program started to come together to maintain relevancy. Over 80% of Americans live in and around cities. You know, we're kind of all a testament to that. We probably live somewhere near a major city for resources and those sorts of things. And they want to connect urban and suburban residents to nature and to create that next generation of outdoor stewards. There's been a lot of talk on, you know, nature deficit disorders. A lot of folks don't necessarily grow up on a farm like they used to. You just don't have that background any longer from folks coming through college and that kind of thing. You know, I almost feel like I missed out on an education from not growing up somewhere similarly. I got a lot of awesome opportunities because I got to go play in the woods, but some kids don't have that any longer. So how can we connect to those people? I will say, why I mentioned those priority resources, I do believe that, you know, we'll always have a connection to hunting, fishing, those kinds of things, but a lot of the youth today don't have that background either. So how can we connect to those groups and teach them some of these things and why the refuge system still exists today? So 4 critical elements of the urban wildlife program: community focused, intentional, inclusive, and collaborative. And that's probably what you hear in just about every plan you ever read. What does that mean? Or at least I think of that. You know, how do we, you know, tangible feel that? And how do we calculate that? And it's a lot of times, who are we engaging with? You know, those people that have always known what a refuge is and why it's there. How can we make that where we can count that and make it measurable? And so those are some of those things we're looking at with those 4 critical elements. So this here is a map. Oh no, it got louder. This map here is all the urban national wildlife refuges in the nation. The really light gray dots are all the national wildlife refuges. If you ever get a chance to go to them and they're not necessarily in an urban area, they're really awesome. You know, I've spent a lot of time in the Dakotas chasing ducks, and it's really beautiful if you get out to the Badlands. So there are a lot of really beautiful places, but those are not where 80% of Americans live. So how can you connect them and show them what the refuge system is all about? So they started to see this habitat near urban areas. And as you can see, Hackmatack is right up there in North Illinois, and it does cross over into Wisconsin. It's a bi-state refuge. Then they have a few that are flagship. I think there's 7 flagship urban refuges. And then those other, like the orange dots, are the partnership cities, and then the red birds or urban bird treaty cities. So there's lots of ways the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is attempting to engage with a lot of different types of people. Urban refuges overall, I believe there's like 111 currently. And to qualify as an urban refuge, you have to be 25 miles of a population of 250,000 or more. So this is the current slide of parcels that will be open to the public for Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge. It's around 430 acres. There are some easements that remain in private land ownership, which are not open to the public, and this bumps us up to about almost 500 acres in this area. So all this awesome work, you know, I talked about, I'm part of, well, Fish and Wildlife Service, we do threatened and endangered work. This dream came to life. This land is now on the landscape being managed. Okay, what's the result of some of those things? So here's a picture from this past summer of the rusty patch bumblebee, a federally endangered bumblebee. A lot of our native bumblebees have started to decline relatively rapidly. And I would say that is somewhat of a success, in my opinion, that this is now being found in a place that's never been documented before. So that's pretty exciting for me as someone new to this area, and getting to meet all of you. And I think my presentation was a little different than others. I didn't have too much data, so to speak, but maybe if I'm invited back next year, we'll have some more things to talk about. With that being said, that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm around. I unfortunately won't be able to be here till the end of the summit, but I'll be around through lunch and a few of the other programs. And if we have time, I tend to do that, talk quickly. So, but if you know, I don't get to you, here's my work cell phone number and my address. Should put my email in there, but all right, any questions? All right.
Welcome to the valley.
Thanks. I saw one hand back there.
How do people identify if you're out driving around? Are there signs on those smaller parcels?
Yes, yeah, there are some kiosks, parking lots. 2 of the newest parcels we just got this past winter, so those are not delineated with signs just yet. And then the parking lots are currently being in the engineering department of the Fish and Wildlife Service on how to put those in, and working with DOT if they have to cut a curb or something like that. But yeah, and if you want to go to the website, Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge, there'll be, you know, what can you do here? For instance, you know, the Turner parcel in Wisconsin, you can hunt there. So a lot of folks come and hunt for deer and that kind of thing. So yeah. Cool. Thank you.